Someone once said, perhaps it was Sister Carol, that the best commentary on the Bible is the Bible. So when you hear hating your father and mother and family and spouse and all, don't get too upset. Because if you know your Bible, you know that Jesus is speaking in hyperbole, because elsewhere he has laid it down that love is the whole criterion of his coming into the world, and he's called us to love as he loves us, etc., etc. So, it doesn't mean we have to go around hating our relatives, although in some cases that comes rather easily. The key to the gospel today is the first line. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus. Now remember, last week we were in a private home having dinner with Jesus. Now we're out on the road. He's moving down. We know it's his last journey from Galilee to Jerusalem. Large crowds were following him. Celebrity groupies, we would call them. Well, large crowds moving in one direction could be a funeral procession. As a matter of fact, that's probably the accurate description, although Jesus knows it, but even the 12 apostles haven't gotten the message, even though he told them, I am going to Jerusalem to die. Well, it could be a march. Marches are things that people gather and move on with. And this is a perfect setting for that. We have Galileans for the most part, and they're going to Jerusalem, so there's a contrast right there. The guys from the sticks and the men from the city. And of course, they were peasants, probably most in this crowd, and they were going towards the seat of power, Jerusalem. They were probably all laity, and they were going to the bastion of the clergy, the temple in Jerusalem. And they were all Jews, of course, and the Romans were in Jerusalem. So, it could have been a march in the minds of many of those people, and I'm sure it was. We're going to see some action. We're going to get things done. But it could also be a parade, because everybody loves a parade, right? And that's probably the best description. And that's why Jesus decides that he's not going to let these people go on with their delusions. He's going to speak to them about this movement that they're with, following him to Jerusalem. And so he spells it out. Now, when he tells them to hate their father and mother, they understand the hyperbole, I think, but you have to remember in that culture, family, father, mother, spouse, children, aunts and uncles, that was your life. That was your means of survival. That's where the next meal came from. That's where your Social Security lay. That's where literal survival came. Outside the family, you were you were just at the whim of anybody. And so when he says you've got to turn your back on your family if you're going to follow me, wow. But of course, having that kind of family structure, which in some ways I think we admire, that togetherness, also brings consequences. If you belong to that kind of a family group, you are constrained to conform if you're going to stay in the group. You got to be on good terms with everybody. You got to blend in. It's a very stifling way of life, really. You sort of give up your personal freedom for the sake of survival. But Jesus is forming a new family. Kingdom people. And nothing, no one, no thing, nothing is to be preferred to Christ and his new family, if we choose to join the new family. I suspect that after this little gospel scene today, the parade got less and less in numbers. See, loyalty to Christ must redefine all other loyalties. That's what he's saying. And the cross that he's offering is the uncertainty which comes from choosing to live in this new family. It's an economic cross. They wouldn't be able to rely necessarily on their natural family anymore for their livelihood. But it's always a cross in any generation to give your loyalty over to Christ, to follow Christ, to leave behind, at least be willing to leave behind, all our safety nets, be they economic, psychological, familial, personal. There was a man who was put to death by the Nazis in 1945, I think it was, and he wrote a book called Cost of Discipleship, which is well worth reading, because he defines there, in modern terms, what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. And so, like Solomon in the first reading, we need to pray for wisdom. Wisdom to make a choice. Because we have to make a choice. Because not to choose is to choose to be loyal to Christ. And that choice doesn't come once. It comes often. Even every day.